Xiaomi Mi 4 vs Samsung Galaxy S5 comparison. The Xiaomi Mi 4 breaks the traditional perception of cheap plastic Chinese phones, as it comes with a sturdy stainless steel frame that gives it a lot of character. The back of the phone is still made from uninspiring glossy plastic that might be practical, but is still a fingerprint magnet. Still, the phone is reassuringly solidly put together. The Galaxy S5, on the other hand, feels much less rigid, and its all-plastic body does not exude any feeling of premium quality as one would expect from a flagship device. The back cover of the S5 features a dot pattern, and we actually do prefer its softer finish over the glossy plastic of the Mi 4, though it's mostly a question of personal preference. In terms of buttons, Xiaomi uses virtual, on-screen navigation keys, while the Galaxy S5 is equipped with a large, physical home key with a fingerprint scanner inside, in addition to two virtual keys on its sides. All else is physical buttons. Those are crafted beautifully on the Mi 4, they are all on the right-hand side, made of aluminum, and are quite clicky. The S5 has its lock key on the right, and volume rocker on the left, and while not terrible, they do not feel as responsive. The Xiaomi Mi 4 comes with a 5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080 x 1920 pixels, Full HD, while the Samsung Galaxy S5 features a tad larger, 5.1-inch screen using a different, Super AMOLED panel, but the same 1080p resolution. Both appear practically equally sharp, with no pixelization noticeable as pixel density on the two is very high, 441 ppi on Mi 4 and 432 ppi on the S5. The bigger difference comes in color reproduction. We were disappointed with the lack of proper calibration on Samsung's Galaxy S5, as it has a very noticeable greenish tint that spoils the experience. You can pick between different screen modes on the S5, but the issue persists even in the better ones. With the Android 5.0 Lollipop update still to come for both the Mi 4 and the Galaxy S5, we're dealing with Android 4.4 KitKat on both devices. It's far from the same interface, though. Xiaomi uses its MIUI skin, a deep overhaul of the Android interface, while Samsung goes with its TouchWiz UI, a skin with its distinct flavor, but not so far from the roots of stock Android. The Xiaomi MIUI custom UI has a long history, first as a launcher, then as a Xiaomi skin, and it has received its last major overhaul just a few months ago in version 6.0. If we had to summarize the MIUI v6 experience, we'd say that it is an adaptation of iOS 7/8 for Android with all of the essential Apple platform features, no app drawer, translucent menus, similar universal search bar, and more. This striking similarity might be worrying to some, but there is one thing that no one could argue with: the MIUI skin runs in a surprisingly fluid manner. The Xiaomi Mi 4 comes in a 16GB and 64GB models, and there is no option to expand this memory, there's no micro SD card slot. Samsung, on the other hand, practically offers a 16GB model of the S5 only, but it does have expandable storage via a micro SD card slot supporting up to 128GB cards. The Xiaomi Mi 4 comes with a 13-megapixel main camera, while the Galaxy S5 sports a 16-megapixel shooter, both coming with a single LED flash. Up front, the Mi 4 has a bigger than usual, 8-megapixel camera, while the S5 makes do with a 2-megapixel selfie cam. The Mi 4's average-sized, 1/3.06 13-megapixel Sony IMX214 sensor comes with a 4:3 native ratio, while the Galaxy S5 sports a larger, 1/2.6 16-megapixel Samsung-made sensor with a 16:9 native aspect ratio. These sensor sizes result in a pixel pitch of the quite tiny 1.1 micron on both cameras. In terms of optics, the Mi 4 comes with a very fast, f/1.829mm lens, while the lens on the S5 is a slower, f/2.21 with 31mm focal length. The Xiaomi Mi 4 crams in a surprisingly large battery for its size, and it does great in terms of battery life. We put all smartphones under a simulated average non-stop use test, with the display pre-calibrated at 200 nits, a level comfortable for indoor use. The Mi 4 scored in the top ranks with 8 hours and 32 minutes of non-stop use, while the Galaxy S5 was a step behind with a score of 7 hours and 26 minutes, a difference of 15% in favor of the Mi 4. The Mi 4 defaults to a battery-efficient mode that caps performance just slightly, but since that seems the one mode that most will use, that's what we used for our tests. It's also worth saying that both are fairly quick to charge back from 0 to 100%, it takes some 2 hours and 6 minutes on the Mi 4 vs 2 hours and 2 minutes on the S5. Both feature 5-ish 1080p displays, but we prefer the colors on the Mi 4. The performance potential with Snapdragon 801 on both is identical, but Xiaomi makes much better use of it with its MIUI skin that is surprisingly well polished and rich in features, and finally, the Mi 4 has a longer lasting battery. The Mi 4 is not without its slight issues. The 13-megapixel camera, while good, is a step below the 16-megapixel shooter of the S5. The big drawback in the Mi 4 currently is the lack of 4G LTE support outside of China. If that does not bother you too much, though, the Mi 4 offers great value for the money, with an off-contract price of just around $370 for the 16GB version. It is a way better deal than the $520 16GB Galaxy S5.